Chapter 1. The Magna Carta. The birth of constitutional governance and its lasting legacy. The Magna Carta, often hailed as the cornerstone of modern democracy, is a charter of rights agreed upon by King John of England and a group of rebel barons in 1215. This seminal document established the principle that the king and his government were not above the law. It has had a profound impact on the development of our legal systems and constitutional governance warrants around the world. To fully appreciate its significance, we need to delve into the historical context that led to its creation, its key provisions, and its lasting influence on political thought and law. The Magna Carta was born out of a period of more intense political turmoil in medieval England. King John reigned 1216, was an unpopular monarch known for heavy taxation, military failures, arbitrary rule. His reign was marked by a series of conflicts, both domestic and foreign, which drained the royal treasury and led to widespread discontent among his subjects, particularly the nobility. 1. Loss of Normandy, 1204. King John lost Normandy and other French territories to King Philip II of France. This weakened England's influence on the continent. To fund military campaigns, John bears increased taxation, angering the barons. 2. Conflict with the Pope, 1209-1213. John clashed with Pope Innocent III over the appointment of the Archbishop of Canterbury. As a result, he was excommunicated, and England was placed under an interdict, causing a religious crisis. 3. Rebellion of the Barons, 1215. Tired of John's abuses of power, a group of men's leading barons rebelled. They demanded that the king agree to a set of rules that would limit his power and protect their rights. Facing the threat of civil war, King John met the barons at Runnymede, a meadow by the River Thames, on June 15, 1215. There, under immense pressure, he agreed to the terms laid out in a document that would become known as the Magna Carta, Great Charter. The Magna Carta was not entirely new. It drew upon earlier traditions of Anglo-Saxon law and previous charters of rights. However, it was the first time that such rights had been codified in a formal document that directly challenged royal authority. The original Magna Carta contained 63 clauses, addressing a wide range of issues, from church rights to feudal payments. While many of these clauses were specific to the grievances of the barons, several had broader implications for the governance of the kingdom. Clause 39. No free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land. This clause established the principle that no one, not even the king, could arbitrarily punish a free man without following our legal procedures. It is the foundation of the right to a fair trial and due process of law. Clause Charter 40. To no one will we sell, to no one deny or delay, right or justice. This emphasized that justice should be accessible to all and not be corrupted or delayed. It reinforced that the martyr's law should be applied fairly and consistently. Clause 12. No scutage or aid may be levied in our kingdom without its general consent, unless it is for ransom for the king's eldest son being made a knight, and once for the marrying of the king's eldest daughter, and for these there shall be a reasonable aid. This addressed taxation, limiting the king's ability to levy taxes without consent. It laid the groundwork for parliamentary approval of taxation, a central issue in English constitutional history. Clause 61. The Security Clause established a council of 25 barons to enforce the Magna Carta. If the king had violated the charter, the barons had the right to take action against him, including seizing royal lands. This was radical for its time, as it placed the king under the supervision of his subjects, challenging the traditional notion of absolute monarchy. Despite its significance, the Magna Carta was not immediately successful. King John quickly sought to annul the charter. With the support of Pope Innocent III, the Magna Carta was declared null and void. This led to the First Barons' War, 1215 to 1217, a civil conflict between the king and rebel barons. The war ended after John's death in 1216. John's 9-year-old son, Henry III, was crowned king, and his regents reissued a modified version of the Magna Carta to secure peace. 1216, 1217, and 1295. The Magna Carta was reissued multiple times, with some clauses removed. During 1297, King Edward III officially incorporated the Magna Carta into English law. Over the centuries, the Magna Carta became a symbol of the struggle against tyranny and the defense of individual rights. 17th century, used to challenge Stuart monarchs who sought absolute power. English Civil War, 1642-1651. The Magna Carta was cited to support the idea that the king was subject to the law. 1689. The English Bill of Rights, built upon the principles of the Magna Carta. The U.S. Constitution, 1787. The Magna Carta influenced the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948, reflects the Magna Carta's principles of justice and legal fairness. Beyond its legal and political impact, the Magna Carta remains a powerful symbol of liberty and justice. The rule of law, the enduring struggle for human rights. Even today, it is celebrated worldwide as one of the most important documents in the history of human civilization. Chapter 2. The Fall of the Roman Empire. The fall of the Roman Empire, one of the most debated and studied events in history, marks the end of one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever seen. The Western Roman Empire, which had dominated the Mediterranean and much of Europe for centuries, finally crumbled in 476 AD, when the last emperor Romulus Augustulus was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Oacer. The decline of Rome was not a single cataclysmic event, but a gradual process, influenced by a complex mix of internal weaknesses and external pressures. This fact explores the multifaceted reasons behind the fall, its immediate impact, and the long-term legacy of Rome's demise. At its height, around the 2nd century AD, the Roman Empire was a vast and formidable power. It stretched from the British Isles in the west to the Middle East in the east, encompassing large parts of Europe, North Africa, and Asia. The Pax Romana, a period of relative peace and stability lasting about 200 years, allowed Rome to consolidate its territories, develop extensive trade networks, and achieve remarkable feats in architecture, engineering, law, and governance. Rome's power was built on a combination of military prowess, political acumen, and the integration of conquered peoples into the Roman system. The empire was known for its well-trained legions, an extensive network of roads, and a complex bureaucracy that managed its vast territories. The Roman economy was largely agrarian, but it also relied heavily on trade, with goods flowing into Rome from all corners of the empire, from grain in Egypt to spices from India. However, even at the height of its power, the seeds of Rome's decline were already being sown. The empire faced numerous challenges, including economic difficulties, military overextension, and social and political instability. Over time, these issues would combine with external pressures to bring about the empire's downfall. One of the major factors contributing to the fall of the Roman Empire was its economic decline. The Roman economy was heavily relying on agriculture, which was labor-intensive and vulnerable to fluctuations in weather and productivity. As the empire expanded, it became increasingly difficult to manage its vast territories and ensure the efficient collection of taxes. The Roman state required immense resources to fund its military, public works, and bureaucracy, leading to a heavy tax burden on the population. The economic difficulties were exacerbated by inflation and a debasement of the currency. In the 3rd century AD, the empire faced a series of financial crises, as successive emperors reduced the silver content of the denarius, the standard Roman coin, to fund their expenditures. This led to rampant inflation, a loss of confidence in the currency, and a decline in trade and economic activity. The empire's once thriving cities began to decline as urban population shrank and people moved to the countryside in search of security and sustenance. Socially, the Roman Empire was also in decline. The once dominant Roman aristocracy, which had provided leadership and stability, was increasingly disconnected from the rest of society. The divide between the rich and the poor grew wider, leading to social tensions and unrest. The traditional Roman values of discipline, civic duty, and loyal to the state eroded over time, replaced by a focus on personal wealth and luxury. The rise of Christianity, which became the official religion of the empire in the 4th century, also contributed to changes in social and cultural values, as the new religion's emphasis on the afterlife and spiritual concerns sometimes clashed with traditional Roman practices. The Roman Empire was built on military power, but by the 3rd century AD, its military was increasingly stretched thin. The empire's borders were vast, and defending them required a large and well-equipped army. However, the Roman legions were often engaged in multiple conflicts simultaneously, including defending against Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube rivers, and fighting the Sassanid Empire in the east. The Roman military faced several key challenges that weakened its effectiveness. First, the empire was increasingly reliant on mercenaries and foreign troops, who were often less loyal and less disciplined than traditional Roman soldiers. These troops were recruited from the very Germanic tribes that Rome sought to keep out, leading to situations where the empire's defenders had divided loyalties. Second, the Roman army suffered from a lack of effective leadership, as the imperial succession became increasingly unstable. The 3rd century was marked by the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of nearly constant civil war, during which numerous claimants to the throne vied for power. This instability undermined the coherence and discipline of the military. Overextension was another major problem. The empire was simply too large to be effectively governed and defended with the resources available. The vast distances between the emperor frontiers made it difficult to respond quickly to threats, and the logistical challenges of moving troops and supplies across such a large area further strained the military. Political instability was a significant factor in the decline of the Roman Empire. The imperial system, which relied on the authority of a single ruler, became increasingly fragile as emperors were overthrown, assassinated, or replaced in quick succession. The lack of a clear and stable system of succession meant that power struggles were common, with rival factions often resorting to violence to secure the throne. The crisis of the 3rd century, 284 AD, was a particularly tumultuous period, during which the empire nearly collapsed under the combined pressures of internal strife, economic instability, and external invasions. During this time, the empire saw the rapid succession of over 20 emperors, many of whom were military leaders who had seized power by force. This period of chaos and civil war severely weakened the empire, as resources were diverted from defending the frontiers to fighting internal conflicts. Corruption and inefficiency also plagued the Roman government, as the empire grew more complex, and the bureaucracy became slow and increasingly corrupt. Officials often enriched themselves at the expense of the state, and the legal system became less effective in administering justice. The loss of public trust in the government further eroded the empire's stability. While internal factors played a significant role in the decline of the Roman Empire, external pressures were ultimately what brought it down. From the 3rd century onward, the empire faced increasing pressure from various barbarian groups, including the Goths, Vandals, Huns, and Franks. These groups were not a monolithic force, but rather a collection of different tribes and peoples, each with their own motivations and goals. The Visos, a Germanic tribe, were among the first to deal a significant blow to the Roman Empire. In 376 AD, the Visigoth, fleeing from the Huns, sought refuge within the Roman Empire. The Romans initially allowed them to settle in the Balkans, but mistreatment and exploitation by Roman officials led to a rebellion. In 378 AD, the Visigoth inflicted a crushing defeat on the Roman army at the Battle of Adrianople, where Emperor Valens was killed. This defeat was a turning point, as it demonstrated the vulnerability of the Roman military and opened the door for further invasions. In 410 AD, the Visigoth, under their leader Allar, sacked Rome itself, a shocking event that sent ripples of fear and disbelief throughout the empire. Although Rome was no longer the capital, the imperial court had moved to Raina. The sack of the city symbolized the decline of Roman power and prestige. The Vandals, another Germanic tribe, crossed into North Africa and established a kingdom in what was one of Rome's most prosperous provinces. In 455 AD, the Vandals sacked Rome again, further eroding the empire's power and influence. The final blow came from the Ostrogoths, a branch of the Goths, who, under their leader Odoacer, deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, in 476 AD. Odoacer declared himself king of Italy and sent the imperial regalia to the Eastern Roman Emperor in Constantinople, signaling the end of the Western Roman Empire. While the Western Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the Eastern Roman Empire, also known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to exist for nearly 1,000 more years, centered in Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. The Byzantine Empire preserved much of the Roman heritage, including its legal system, administrative practices, and cultural achievements. The Byzantine Empire was more economically robust and politically stable than its Western counterpart, and it managed to fend off many of the invasions that had plagued the West. The Byzantines also developed a distinct culture that blended Roman, Greek, and Christian elements, leaving a lasting legacy in art, architecture, and theology. One of the most significant contributions of the Byzantine Empire was the codification of Roman law under Emperor Justinian in the 6th century. The Corpus Juris Civilis, body of civil law, also known as the Justinian Code, became the foundation for legal systems in many European countries and had a lasting impact on the development of Western legal traditions. Despite its achievements, the Byzantine Empire faced its own challenges, including invasions by the Persians, Arabs, and later the Turks. The empire gradually lost territory and influence, and it ultimately fell in 1453, when Constantinople was captured by the Ottoman Turks. The fall of Constantinople marked the end of the Roman Empire in the East and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's dominance in the region. The fall of the Western Roman Empire marked the end of ancient Rome as a political entity, but its legacy continued to shape the world in profound ways. The idea of Rome as a center of power and culture persisted long after the empire's collapse. Medieval rulers, such as Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Emperors, sought to revive the idea of a united Christian empire, modeled on Rome. The Roman Empire's influence can be seen in the development of the Latin language, which evolved into the Romance languages, Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Romanian, and remained the language of learning, law, and the church for centuries. Roman law, as codified in the Justinian Code, influenced legal systems throughout Europe and beyond, laying the groundwork for modern concepts of justice and governance. The Roman Catholic Church, which had become the dominant religious institution in the Western world, preserved many aspects of Roman culture and governance. The Church's hierarchical structure, centered in Rome, mirrored the administrative organization of the Roman Empire, and the Pope came to be seen as the spiritual successor to the Roman emperors. Roman architecture and engineering achievements, such as aqueducts, roads, and monumental buildings, continued to inspire builders and architects throughout history. The use of the arch, vault, and dome in construction became hallmarks of Roman architectural influence, seen in structures ranging from medieval cathedrals to modern government buildings. In the realm of political thought, the Roman Republic and Empire served as models for later political systems. The concepts of republicanism, citizenship, and the rule of law were integral to the development of Western political philosophy and were revived during the Renaissance and Enlightenment. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was a complex and gradual process, driven by a combination of internal weaknesses and external pressures. While the political entity of Rome collapsed, its cultural, legal, and architectural legacy endured and continued to shape the development of Western civilization. The story of Rome's decline and fall serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of even the greatest empires. It underscores the importance of political stability, economic resilience, and social cohesion in maintaining the strength of a nation. The Roman Empire's achievements and its ultimate downfall have provided countless lessons for subsequent generations, influencing everything from governance and law to art and architecture. The Roman Empire's legacy is omnipresent in modern society, from the languages we speak, to the legal systems that govern us, to the buildings that surround us. The fall of Rome, while marking the end of an era, also paved the way for the development of new cultures, nations, and ideas that have shaped the world we live in. Chapter 3: The Age of Exploration. The Age of Exploration, which spanned roughly from the early 15th century to the 17th century, was a period of unprecedented global exploration, driven by European powers in search of new trade routes, wealth, and territories. This era marked the beginning of globalization, as explorers connected previously isolated parts of the world, leading to profound changes in commerce, culture, and geopolitics. The Age of Exploration also set the stage for European colonization, the spread of Christianity, and the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies that would shape the modern world. This fact explores the motivations behind the Age of Exploration, the key figures and voyages, the impact on indigenous populations, and the lasting legacy of this transformative period. Several factors converged to propel European nations into an era of exploration and expansion. These motivations can be broadly categorized into economic, religious, political, and technological factors. Economic interests. One of the primary drivers of exploration was the search for new trade routes and access to valuable commodities, such as spices, silk, and gold. The overland routes to Asia, such as the Silk Road, were long, dangerous, and controlled by middlemen, particularly the Ottoman Empire, which had established a monopoly on trade between Europe and the East. European nations, especially Portugal and Spain, sought alternative sea routes to Asia to bypass these intermediaries and gain direct access to the lucrative spice trade. The wealth generated by these new trade routes promised to enrich not only individual merchants, but also the coffers of the emerging nation-states of Europe. Religious zeal. The spread of Christianity, particularly Roman Catholicism, was another significant motivation for exploration. European powers, driven by a desire to convert non-Christian peoples, saw exploration as a means of spreading the Christian faith to new territories. The Reconquista in Spain, which culminated in the expulsion of Muslim rulers from the Iberian Peninsula in 1492, further fueled a missionary zeal that extended beyond Europe. This religious drive was often coupled with the desire to counter the spread of Islam, which had dominated much of the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa. Political ambition. The emergence of strong, centralized monarchies in countries like Spain, Portugal, England, and France provided the political and financial backing necessary for long-distance exploration, These monarchs sought to expand their influence, power, and prestige by acquiring new territories and establishing overseas colonies. Exploration and conquest became a means of demonstrating national power and competing with rival nations for global dominance. The competition among European powers also spurred technological and navigational advancements, as each sought to outdo the others in discovery and colonization. Technological advancements. The age of exploration was made possible by significant advancements in maritime technology and navigation. The development of the caravel, a small, highly maneuverable sailing ship with a lateen sail, allowed explorers to sail further and more efficiently. The invention of the astrolabe and the magnetic compass improved navigational accuracy, enabling sailors to determine their position at sea with greater precision. Additionally, the advancement of cartography, or map-making, allowed explorers to document their voyages and chart new territories. These technological innovations were crucial in overcoming the challenges of long-distance sea travel and opened up the possibility of reaching distant lands. The age of exploration is marked by the achievements of several key explorers who embarked on voyages that would change the course of history. Their journeys not only expanded the geographical knowledge of the time, but also paved the way for European colonization and the establishment of global trade networks. Prince Henry the Navigator. Prince Henry of Portugal, known as the Navigator, played a crucial role in the early stages of the Age of Exploration. Although he never sailed on the expeditions himself, Prince Henry sponsored numerous voyages along the west coast of Africa in the early 15th century. His support for exploration led to the discovery of new sea routes, the establishment of Portuguese trading posts, and the beginning of the Atlantic slave trade. Prince Henry's efforts laid the groundwork for the later achievements of Portuguese explorers such as Bolo Diaz and Vasco da Gama. Bitude and Vasco da Gama. In 1488, Barão Dias became the first European to sail around the southern tip of Africa, known as the Cape of Good Hope, proving that a sea route to the Indian Ocean was possible. This achievement was a major milestone in the search for a direct route to Asia. A decade later, in 1498, Vasco da Gama successfully sailed from Portugal to India, opening up a sea route that would become vital for the spice trade. Dam's voyage established Portuguese dominance in the Indian Ocean and marked the beginning of European colonial expansion in Asia. Christopher Columbus. Perhaps the most famous explorer of the Age of Exploration, Christopher Columbus, an Italian navigator sponsored by the Spanish monarchy, set sail in 1492 in search of a westward route to Asia. Instead, Columbus reached the Caribbean islands, believing he had found a new route to the East Indies. His voyages led to the discovery of the Americas by Europeans, although the lands he encountered had been inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Columbus's expeditions opened the door to European exploration and colonization of the New World, setting in motion a series of events that would profoundly reshape the world. Ferdinand Magellan. Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer sailing under the Spanish flag, led the first expedition to circumnavigate the globe in 1519. Magellan set out with 5 ships to find a westward route to the Spice Islands, modern-day Indonesia. Although Magellan himself was killed in the Philippines in 1521, his expedition continued under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano. In 1522, the remaining ship, the Victoria, returned to Spain, completing the first circumnavigation of the Earth. Magellan's voyage demonstrated the vastness of the world and provided crucial information about global geography, proving that the Earth was indeed round and that the oceans were interconnected. Hernán Cortés and Francisco Pizarro. The Age of Exploration also witnessed the conquest of powerful indigenous empires in the Americas. Hernán Cortés, a Spanish conquistador, led an expedition to Mexico in 1519, where he encountered the Aztec Empire. Through a combination of military force, alliances with rival indigenous groups, and the spread of diseases like smallpox, CTIs was able to capture the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan and bring the empire under Spanish control. Similarly, Francisco Pizarro led the conquest of the Inca Empire in South America in the 1530s. Pizarro's small force, aided by internal divisions within the Inca Empire and the spread of European diseases, captured the Inca capital of Cusco and established Spanish rule over much of the Andes. These conquests marked the beginning of European dominance in the Americas and the exploitation of its vast resources. The Age of Exploration had devastating consequences for the indigenous populations of the Americas, Africa, and Asia. The arrival of Europeans brought with it disease, violence, and the destruction of entire cultures, disease and demographic collapse. One of the most catastrophic effects of European contact was the introduction of diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza to the indigenous populations of the Americas. These diseases, to which the indigenous peoples had no immunity, spread rapidly and decimated entire communities. It is estimated that as much as 90% of the indigenous population in the Americas perished due to disease within a century of contact. The demographic collapse had profound social and cultural impacts, leading to the loss of knowledge, traditions, and social structures that had developed over millennia. Colonization and enslavement. The European powers quickly moved to colonize the newly discovered lands, often with little regard for the rights and sovereignty of the indigenous peoples. The Spanish and Portuguese, in particular, established vast colonial empires in the Americas, exploiting the land and its people for economic gain. The encomenda system, which granted Spanish colonists the right to demand labor from indigenous people, led to widespread exploitation and abuse. In Africa, the demand for labor to work in the plantations and mines of the Americas led to the expansion of the transatlantic slave trade, with millions of Africans forcibly transported to the New World in brutal conditions, cultural destruction, and assimilation. The European colonization of the Americas and other parts of the world often involved the suppression of indigenous cultures, languages, and religions. European missionaries, particularly from the Catholic Church, sought to convert indigenous peoples to Christianity, often by force or coercion. Traditional religious practices were outlawed, and indigenous languages were suppressed in favor of European languages. The cultural destruction was immense, as ancient knowledge, art, and traditions were lost or marginalized. The Age of Exploration also led to the Columbian Exchange, a vast and complex exchange of goods, ideas, people, and diseases between the Old World, Europe, Africa, and Asia, and the New World, the Americas. This exchange had far-reaching consequences for the development of global societies. Crops in agriculture. The introduction of new crops from the Americas to Europe, Africa, and Asia had a significant impact on global agriculture. Crops such as maize, corn, potatoes, tomatoes, and peanuts became staples in the diets of people around the world. The potato, in particular, had a profound impact on Europe, where it became a key food source and contributed to population growth. Conversely, Old World crops such as wheat, rice, sugarcane, and coffee were introduced to the Americas, transforming the agricultural landscapes of the New World. Animals and livestock. The Columbian Exchange also involved the transfer of animals between the Old and New Worlds. European settlers introduced horses, cattle, pigs, and sheep to the Americas, where they had a significant impact on indigenous societies. Horses, for example, transformed the way of life for many Native Americans groups on the Great Plains, enabling them to hunt buffalo more effectively and to expand their territories. Meanwhile, animals such as llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs, which were domesticated in the Andes, became known in the Old World, although they did not have as widespread an impact as European livestock in the Americas. Global trade networks. The Age of Exploration and the Columbian Exchange led to the establishment of global trade networks that connected the continents in ways that had never been seen before. European powers established trade routes that brought goods such as spices, silk, and porcelain from Asia, silver and gold from the Americas, and slaves from Africa. These trade networks were the foundation of the global economy, leading to the rise of mercantilism and the growth of European empires. The wealth generated by these networks fueled further exploration, colonization, and conflict as European powers sought for control of trade routes and territories. The Age of Exploration had a profound impact on technology, science, and culture, influencing the way people understood the world and their place in it. Advancements in navigation and cartography. The need for accurate navigation and mapping during the Age of Exploration led to significant advancements in these fields. The development of more precise instruments, such as the marine chronometer, allowed sailors to determine their longitude at sea, improving their ability to navigate across vast oceans. Cartographers began to create more accurate maps and charts, incorporating the new lands and seas that were being discovered. The works of cartographers like Gerardus Mercator, who developed the Mercator projection, became essential tools for explorers and merchants, shaping the way the world was perceived and understood. Scientific inquiry in the Enlightenment. The discoveries made during the Age of Exploration fueled a growing interest in scientific inquiry and the natural world. The collection of new plants, animals, and minerals from distant lands provided European scientists with a wealth of material to study, leading to advancements in fields such as botany, zoology, and geology. The exchange of knowledge and ideas between different cultures also contributed to the development of the scientific method and the rise of the Enlightenment, a period of intellectual and philosophical growth that emphasized reason, observation, and experimentation. Cultural exchange and syncretism. The contact between European explorers and the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Africa, and Asia led to a complex process of cultural exchange and syncretism. European settlers adopted and adapted indigenous technologies, foods, and customs, while indigenous peoples incorporated European elements into their own cultures. This blending of cultures resulted in the creation of new hybrid forms of art, music, language, and religion. In the Americas, for example, the mixing of African, European, and Native American traditions gave rise to unique cultural expressions, such as the syncretic religious practices seen in Latin America. The Age of Exploration had a profound and lasting impact on the world, shaping the course of history in ways that continue to resonate today. Colonialism and empire. The voyages of exploration led to the establishment of vast European empires that spanned the globe. The Spanish and Portuguese empires were among the first and most powerful, but they were soon joined by the British, French, Dutch, and others. These empires brought wealth and power to Europe, but also led to the exploitation and oppression of indigenous peoples, the transatlantic slave trade, and the colonization of entire continents. The legacy of colonialism is still felt today in the economic, social, and political structures of former colonies, as well as in ongoing struggles for independence, identity, and justice. Globalization and trade. The Age of Exploration laid the foundations for the modern global economy. The trade routes and networks established during this period connected the continents in a web of commerce that continues to drive the global economy today. The exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures that began during the Age of Exploration has continued to shape the development of global societies, leading to the interconnected world we live in today. Cultural exchange and diversity. The cultural exchanges that took place during the Age of Exploration contributed to the rich diversity of global cultures. The blending of European, African, Asian, and indigenous American traditions created new forms of art, music, language, and cuisine that continue to evolve and thrive today. The Age of Exploration also laid the groundwork for the modern concept of multiculturalism, as people from different parts of the world came into contact, exchanged ideas, and influenced each other. Scientific and technological progress. The advancements in navigation, cartography, and science that emerged during the Age of Exploration had a lasting impact on the development of technology and knowledge. The drive to explore and understand the world led to the creation of new tools, methods, and theories that have shaped the progress of science and technology. The spirit of exploration and discovery that characterized this period continues to inspire scientific inquiry and innovation today. The Age of Exploration was a pivotal period in world history that transformed the way people understood and interacted with the world. Driven by a combination of economic, religious, political, and technological factors, European explorers ventured into unknown territories, connecting distant lands and cultures in ways that had never been seen before. The impact of the Age of Exploration was profound, leading to the colonization of the Americas, the establishment of global trade networks, the spread of Christianity, and the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. However, it also brought about the destruction of indigenous cultures, the exploitation of peoples and resources, and the beginning of a legacy of colonialism that continues to shape the world today. The Age of Exploration remains a testament to the human spirit of curiosity, ambition, and the desire to push the boundaries of the known world. It is a period that continues to captivate the imagination as we reflect on the achievements, challenges, and consequences of this era of discovery. Chapter 4: The Black Death. The Impact and Transformation of Europe. In the 14th century, the Black Death, one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, swept through Europe between 1347 and 1351, killing an estimated 25 to 50 million people. This catastrophic event not only reshaped the demographic landscape of Europe, but also had profound and lasting effects on its social, economic, religious, and cultural fabric. Understanding the Black Death requires a deep dive into its origins, spread, societal impact, and how it fundamentally transformed Europe. Origins and spread. The cure Black Death is widely believed to have been caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which was primarily spread by fleas that infested rats. The pandemic likely originated in the arid plains of Central Asia, where it spread through the Silk Road, carried by merchant caravans and soldiers moving across trade routes. By the early 1340s, it had reached the Crimean Peninsula, and from there, it spread rapidly to Europe. The disease entered Europe through the port of Messina in Sicily in 1347, brought by Genoese trading ships that had fled a Mongol siege at the Black Sea port of Kaffa. From Sicily, the plague spread across the Italian peninsula, and by 1348, it had reached France, Spain, Portugal, England. The disease followed trade routes and rivers, quickly making its way to Scandinavia, the Baltic states, and eventually reaching the far corners of Europe. The speed at which the Black Death spread was unprecedented. Entire villages were wiped out, and cities saw a significant portion of their populations perish within months. The symptoms of the Black Death were gruesome and unmistakable. The most common form of the disease was the bubonic plague, characterized by sudden onset of fever, chills, and headaches. The appearance of buboes, painfully swollen, lymph nodes, in the groin, armpits, or neck and dent. The buboes would often turn black, giving the disease its name. Other forms of the plague included septicemic plague, which infected the bloodstream, pneumonic plague, which infected the lungs and was highly contagious. Mortality rates varied, but the bubonic plague had a death rate of 60–90%. The septicemic and pneumonic forms were almost always fatal without treatment, which was non-existent at the time. The rapid progression of the disease meant that many victims died within days of showing symptoms, leaving little time for communities to respond. In the face of such overwhelming mortality, traditional burial practices were abandoned. Mass graves, known as plague pits, became common as the sheer number of dead overwhelmed local authorities. The sight of death was everywhere. Streets filled with the UA sick and dying. Bodies left unattended in homes. The constant untolling of church bells for the dead. The concert Black Death had a profound impact on European society. The sudden and massive loss of life led to severe labor shortages, which in turn disrupted the feudal economy that had dominated Europe for centuries. With fewer peasants available to work the land, the surviving laborers found themselves in higher demand. This shift in the labor market gave peasants unprecedented bargaining power, leading to increased wages, better working conditions, a decline in serfdom in Western Europe. The labor shortages also led to changes in agriculture. Landowners, unable to maintain large estates, with a reduced workforce, began converting inarable land to pasture, which required less labor. This shift contributed to the rise of a more diversified economy, including wool production, a key industry in regions like Flanders and England. The decline of serfdom in Western Europe can be traced to the aftermath of the Black Death, as the traditional feudal system began to break down under the pressures of the changing economy. The Black Death had a profound impact on religious life in Europe. This church, which had been the central institution in medieval European life, was deeply affected by the pandemic. Many clergy members, who were often called upon to provide last rites to the dying, succumbed to the disease themselves. The church's inability to prevent or explain the plague led to a crisis of faith among the population. People began to question the church's authority and the traditional sheer religious explanations for the disaster. In some regions, the church's influence weakened, while in others, it led to a surge in religious fervor, flagellant movements, where groups of people would publicly whip themselves to atone for humanity's sins. These movements were often accompanied by apocalyptic preaching, a belief that the plague was divine punishment. The Black Death also led to an increase in anti-Semitic sentiment and violence. Jews were often scapegoated for the plague, accused of poisoning wells, casting curses on Christian communities. This led to widespread persecution and massacres of Jewish communities across Europe, particularly in Germany, where entire communities were destroyed. The violence against Jews during the Black Death is one of the darkest chapters of medieval European history. The Black Death had a lasting impact on European art and literature. The pervasive presence of death led to the emergence of the memento mori theme. In art, a reminder of the inevitability of death. This period also saw the rise of the Chasque danse macabre, Dance of Death, a popular artistic motif depicting skeletons leading people of all social classes to the grave. The grim realities of the plague were also reflected in literature, such as Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, a collection of novellas set against the backdrop of the Maya. Black Death. The Black Death had far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond the immediate loss of life. In the long term, it contributed to the decline of feudalism, the rise of a market-based economy, increased interest in medicine, and the natural causes of disease. The psychological impact of the Black Death on European society cannot be overstated. The constant presence of death, the breakdown of social norms, and the collapse of traditional authority structures led to a period of profound introspection and change. The memory of the Black Death has endured through the centuries, serving as a symbol of human vulnerability and resilience in the face of an overwhelming odds. Chapter 5: The Rise and Influence of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire, was one of the most enduring and culturally influential empires in history, spanning over a millennium from its founding in 330 AD until its fall in 1453 AD. The Byzantine Empire played a crucial role in preserving classical knowledge, shaping the religious landscape of Europe and the Middle East, and influencing art, architecture, and law in ways that still resonate today. The origins of the Byzantine Empire can be traced back to the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great, who in 1330 AD established a new capital for the Roman Empire on the site of the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. This city, strategically located on the Bosporus Strait, was renamed Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and became the new seat of the Roman Empire. Constantine's decision to move the capital was driven by several factors, including the city's strategic location for trade and defense, its proximity to the empire's eastern frontiers, his desire to create a new Christian capital, distinct from the pagan traditions of Rome. Constantinople quickly grew into one of the most important cities in the world, renowned for its wealth, culture, and formidable defenses. The city's location allowed it to mostly control key trade routes between Europe and Asia, contributing to its prosperity. Additionally, its formidable walls, especially the Theodosian walls built in the 5th century, made it one of the most impregnable cities of the ancient world. One of the defining features of the Byzantine Empire was its role in preserving and transmitting classical Greek and Roman knowledge. As the Western Roman Empire fell to Germanic invasions in the 5th century, the Byzantine Empire continued to thrive, becoming a beacon of learning and culture. During what is often referred to as the Dark Ages in Western Europe, the Byzantines preserved a vast body of classical literature, philosophy, and science, much of which would later be reintroduced to Western Europe during the Renaissance. Religion was at the heart of Byzantine identity. The empire was the center of Orthodox Christianity, and its leaders, including the emperor, played a significant role in the development of Christian theology and church structure. The Byzantine emperor was seen as God's representative on earth, and the empire's political and religious life was deeply intertwined. The Byzantine Church, which later became the Eastern Orthodox Church, developed its own liturgical traditions, theological teachings, artistic styles, distinct from those of the Latin-speaking Western Church centered in Rome. The Byzantine Empire's religious influence extended far beyond its borders. In the 9th century, Byzantine missionaries, Cyril and Methodius, were sent to the Slavic peoples of Eastern Europe, where they developed the Glagolitic alphabet, which later evolved into the Cyrillic alphabet. This was used to translate the Bible, and other religious texts into Slavic languages, laying the foundation for the spread of Orthodox Christianity throughout Eastern Europe. This missionary work eventually led to the conversion of Kievan Rus, the predecessor of modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, to Christianity in 988 AD. Byzantine art and architecture are among the empire's most enduring legacies. The Byzantines developed a distinct style of religious art that emphasized spirituality and the divine, the use of rich colors, especially gold, a focus on religious icons, painted images of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints. These icons were not merely decorative, but were believed to be windows to the divine. playing a central role in Orthodox worship and personal devotion. One of the most remarkable examples of Byzantine architecture is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, originally constructed as a cathedral by Emperor Justinian around in the 6th century. The Hagia Sophia was the largest church in the world for nearly 1,000 years. Its massive dome, which seems to float above the nave, was an engineering marvel of its time and has inspired architects for centuries. The interior of the Hagia Sophia is adorned with stunning mosaics depicting religious scenes in shimmering gold and vibrant colors, exemplifying the Byzantine mastery of mosaic art. Byzantine architecture influenced the development of church buildings across the Christian world, particularly in more Eastern Europe and Russia, where the onion dome and the Greek cross plan shader became hallmarks of Orthodox churches. The Byzantine Empire also made significant contributions to the development of law. Under the Emperor Justinian I, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD, the empire undertook a comprehensive codification of Roman law, known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, the Code of Justinian. This legal code consolidated centuries of legal texts and imperial decrees into a coherent system of law, which had a lasting impact not only in the Byzantine Empire but also in Western Europe. The Corpus Juris Civilis influenced the development of civil law in many European countries and remains the foundation of legal systems in parts of the world today. The Byzantine Empire was known for its sophisticated and disciplined military, which played a key role in the empire's longevity. The Byzantine army was a continuation of the Roman legions, but with significant adaptations to new challenges and technologies. The Byzantines were also skilled in advanced military technology, such as Greek fire, a highly effective incendiary weapon that could burn even on water. Greek fire was often used in naval battles to devastating effect, and its exact composition remains a mystery to this day. The fall of Constantinople and the end of the empire. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and is often considered the end of the Middle Ages. The city was besieged by the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, who employed massive cannons to breach the city's walls. Despite a valiant defense, the vastly outnumbered Byzantine forces were unable to stop the final assault. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine Turaorf, died fighting to defend the city. With the fall of Constantinople, the city was transformed into the capital of the Ottoman Empire, marking a new era in world history. Although the Byzantine Empire fell, its cultural, religious, and legal influence remains profound. The Eastern Orthodox Church traces its roots directly to the Byzantine Christian tradition. Byzantine legal principles remain foundational in many legal systems today, and the art and architecture of the empire continue to inspire. As a bridge between the ancient and modern worlds, the Byzantine Empire preserved the heritage of the Roman Empire, while laying the core foundations for many aspects of modern civilization. Chapter 6. The French Revolution. The French Revolution, a radical upheaval in society and governance. The French Revolution, which lasted from 1789 to 1799, was one of the most significant and transformative events in world history. It marked the end of the Ancien regime, a centuries-old system of monarchy and aristocratic privilege, and led to the rise of modern republicanism, nationalism, and the spread of revolutionary ideas across Europe, and the world. The revolution was a complex and multifaceted event, driven by a combination of political, social, economic, and cultural factors, and its legacy continues to influence contemporary political thought and institutions. The French Revolution did not arise out of a single cause, but rather from a convergence of long-standing social and economic tensions, political discontent, and the influence of Enlightenment ideas. French society in the late 18th century was deeply stratified and characterized by rigid class distinctions. The population was divided into three estates: the first estate, the clergy; the second estate, the nobility; and the third estate, everyone else, including peasants, urban workers, and the bourgeois. The first and second estates enjoyed numerous privileges, including exemption from many taxes, while the third estate, which made up the vast majority of the population, bore the brunt of the tax burden and had little political power. The stark inequality fueled widespread resentment and anger, particularly among the bourgeois, who were economically successful but lacked political influence. By the 1780s, France was facing severe economic problems. The country was burdened with massive debt, largely due to its involvement in expensive wars, including the 7 Years' War and the American War of Independence. The government under King Louis XVI struggled to manage the national finances and was forced to impose new taxes, which were deeply unpopular. Additionally, poor harvest in the late 1780s led to food shortages and soaring bread prices, exacerbating the suffering of the lower classes and sparking unrest in both rural and urban areas. The French monarchy, which had once been one of the most powerful in Europe, was increasingly seen as ineffective and out of touch with the needs of the people. King Louis XV, the well-meaning, was indecisive and lacked the ability to manage the growing crisis. His attempts at financial reform, including efforts to impose taxes on the privileged classes, were met with resistance from the nobility in the parliament, regional courts. The political system of the Onan regime, based on absolutist monarchy, was increasingly viewed as outdated and unjust, especially in light of the ideas of the Enlightenment. The intellectual movement known as the Enlightenment, which flourished in the 18th century, played a crucial role in shaping the ideas and goals of the French Revolution. Enlightenment thinkers such as Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, and Diderot challenged traditional authority and promoted ideals of liberty, equality, and reason. They criticized the arbitrary power of kings, the privileges of the nobility, and the abuses of the church. These ideas resonated with the bourgeois and other segments of society, who sought political reform and greater participation in government. The immediate trigger for the French Revolution was the financial crisis faced by the monarchy in 1788. King Louis XVI was forced to call a meeting of the Estates General, a representative assembly that had not been convened since 1614, to address the kingdom's financial problems. The Estates General, which convened in May 1789, consisted of representatives from all three estates. However, deep divisions quickly emerged over how the voting process should be conducted. Traditionally, each estate had one vote, but the third estate demanded that voting be done by head, which would give them greater influence. When the king and the other estates refused to agree to this demand, the third estate declared itself the National Assembly in June 1789, claiming to represent the true will of the French people. This act of defiance marked the beginning of the revolution. The situation escalated when, fearing that the king would use force to dissolve the National Assembly, Parisians stormed the Bastille, a royal fortress in prison, on July 14, 1789. The fall of the Bastille became a powerful symbol of the revolution and is still celebrated today as France's national day, Bastille Day. The early years of the revolution were marked by a series of dramatic events and radical changes. In August 1789, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a foundational document that proclaimed the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The declaration asserted that all men were born free and equal in rights, including the rights to liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. It also called for the end of feudal privileges and the establishment of a government based on the consent of the governed. The National Assembly also undertook sweeping reforms, including the abolition of the system, the nationalization of church lands, and the introduction of a new administrative and legal framework for France. In 1791, the Assembly drafted a new constitution that established a constitutional monarchy, limiting the powers of the king and creating a legislative assembly, elected by a limited franchise of property-owning men. However, the revolution soon took a more radical turn. In 1792, France declared war on Austria and Prussia, leading to the rise of revolutionary fervor and the radicalization of the revolution. The war, combined with internal divisions and economic hardship, created a sense of crisis that fueled the rise of more extreme political factions, such as the Jacobin, led by figures like Maximilien Robespierre. The monarchy, increasingly seen as a threat to the revolution, was abolished in September 1792, and King Louis VI was put on trial for treason. He was convicted, victed, and executed by guillotine in January 1793, followed by the execution of his wife, Queen Marie Antoinette, later that year. The execution of the king marked the beginning of the Reign of Terror, a period of intense political repression and violence. The Reign of Terror, which lasted from 1793 to 1794, was characterized by the use of revolutionary tribunals to try and execute perceived enemies of the revolution. Thousands of people, including nobles, clergy, and ordinary citizens, were arrested and executed, often on flimsy evidence. The Committee of Public Safety, led by Robespierre, wielded near-dictatorial powers, and the revolution descended into a period of paranoia and bloodshed. The Reign of Terror eventually led to a backlash against its leaders. By mid-1794, the excessive violence and purges, as well as economic hardships, had created widespread disillusionment with the revolutionary government. On July 27, 1794, 9 Thermidor in the revolutionary calendar, Robespierre and his closest allies were arrested by members of the National Convention, who feared they might be the next targets of the terror. Robespierre was executed the following day, along with many of his supporters. His death marked the end of the Reign of Terror and the beginning of the Thermidorian reaction, a period of relative moderation in the rollback of some of the more radical measures enacted during the terror. The National Convention dismantled the Committee of Public Safety, released political prisoners, and repealed many of the laws that had enabled the terror. In 1795, the National Convention adopted a new constitution that established the Directory, a 5-member executive body that governed France for the next 4 years. The Directory was characterized by political instability, corruption, and ongoing economic difficulties. It struggled to maintain control in the face of continued internal unrest and external threats, as France remained at war with several European powers. During this period, a young and ambitious military general named Napoleon Bonaparte began to rise to prominence. Napoleon's military successes, particularly in Italy, made him a national hero and positioned him as a key figure in French politics. In 1799, Napoleon staged a coup d'etat, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate, with himself as first consul. This marked the end of the French Revolution and the beginning of Napoleon's rise to power. The French Revolution had a profound and lasting impact on France and the world. It brought an end to the Ancien regime, abolishing the monarchy, the feudal system, and the privileges of the nobility and clergy. The revolution also established the principles of popular sovereignty, republicanism, and the rule of law, which became foundational elements of modern democratic governance. The revolution's ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity inspired political movements and revolutions across Europe and the Americas. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen became a model for other declarations of rights, including the United States Bill of Rights and the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, the French Revolution also demonstrated the dangers of political extremism and the potential for revolutionary movements to descend into violence and authoritarianism. The Reign of Terror, in particular, serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked power and the pursuit of ideological purity at the expense of human life. The French Revolution also had a significant impact on the development of nationalism, the idea of the nation as a community of citizens with shared rights and responsibilities, rather than as subjects of a monarch, gained widespread acceptance during the Revolution. This new sense of national identity was further reinforced by the wars of the Revolutionary and Napoleonic periods, which mobilized large numbers of citizens in defense of the nation. The Revolution also led to important social and cultural changes. The abolition of feudal privileges and the redistribution of church lands contributed to the rise of a more egalitarian society, at least in theory. The Revolution also promoted the idea of meritocracy, where individuals could rise to positions of power and influence based on their abilities, rather than their birth. This idea would later be embodied in Napoleon's reforms, such as the Napoleonic Code, which codified many of the legal principles established during the Revolution. Culturally, the Revolution had a profound impact on art, literature, and philosophy. The revolutionary period saw the rise of new artistic movements, such as neoclassicism, which drew inspiration from the ideals of the Revolution and the classical world. The Revolution also inspired a wealth of literature, both supportive and critical, that explored the complexities and contradictions of the revolutionary experience. The French Revolution was a complex and multifaceted event that transformed France and the world. It marked the end of centuries of monarchical and aristocratic rule in France and established the principles of republicanism and popular sovereignty. The revolution's impact extended far beyond France's borders, inspiring political movements, revolutions, and reforms across Europe and the Americas. At the same time, the revolution also highlighted the dangers of political extremism and the potential for revolutionary movements to descend into violence and authoritarianism. The Reign of Terror, in particular, serves as a reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the importance of protecting individual rights and freedoms. The legacy of the French Revolution continues to be felt today, as its ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity remain central to modern democratic thought and practice. The revolution's influence can be seen in the development of human rights, the spread of nationalism, and the ongoing struggle for social and political justice around the world. In the end, the French Revolution was not just a political event, but a profound transformation of society and governance that reshaped the course of history and laid the foundations for the modern world. Chapter 7: The American Civil War. The American Civil War, a nation divided and reunited. The American Civil War, fought between 1861 and 1865, was one of the most transformative and defining events in United States history. It was a conflict rooted in deep-seated issues such as states' rights, economic differences, and most importantly, the institution of slavery. The war resulted in the death of over 600,000 soldiers, the emancipation of millions of enslaved people, and the preservation of the Union. The Civil War's impact on the United States was profound, leading to significant social, political, and economic changes that continue to shape the nation today. The causes of the American Civil War are complex and multifaceted, involving a combination of economic, political, and social factors that had been building for decades. Slavery, at the heart of the conflict, was the institution of slavery, which had become deeply entrenched in the Southern economy and society. The Southern states relied heavily on slave labor for the cultivation of cash crops, such as cotton, tobacco, and sugar, which were vital to their economy. By contrast, the Northern states, which had largely abolished slavery by the early 19th century, developed a more diverse economy based on industry, commerce, and small-scale farming. The moral and political debate over slavery intensified as the United States expanded westward, with fierce disputes over whether new territories and states should permit slavery. States' rights. The issue of states' rights was closely tied to the debate over slavery. Southern states argued that they had the right to govern themselves and make their own decisions about whether to allow slavery without interference from the federal government. This belief in the sovereignty of individual states was rooted in a broader interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, which emphasized the rights of states over the powers of the federal government. The northern states, on the other hand, generally supported a stronger federal government that could regulate issues like slavery and maintain national unity. Economic differences. The economic divide between the industrial North and the agrarian South further fueled tensions. The North's economy was rapidly industrializing, with a growing network of railroads, factories, and urban centers. The South, however, remained largely rural and dependent on agriculture, particularly the production of cotton for export. These economic differences contributed to differing views on issues such as tariffs, trade policies, and the expansion of infrastructure, with the South often opposing measures that favored Northern industrial interests. Political polarization. By the mid-19th century, the United States had become deeply polarized along regional lines, with the North and South increasingly viewing each other with suspicion and hostility. The formation of the Republican Party in the 1850s, which was explicitly opposed to the expansion of slavery into new territories, further heightened tensions. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, as president in 1860 was seen by many Southern states as a direct threat to their way of life and their right. Lincoln's election was the final catalyst that led to the secession of Southern states and the outbreak of war. In the wake of Lincoln's election, South Carolina became the first state to secede from the Union on December 20th, 1860. This was quickly followed by the secession of 6 more Southern states: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. These states formed the Confederate States of America in February 1861, with Jefferson Davis elected as its president. The Confederacy claimed that their secession was a lawful exercise of their rights as sovereign states, while the federal government, led by Lincoln, maintained that secession was illegal and unconstitutional. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired on Fort Sumter, a federal fort in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. The attack on Fort Sumter rallied the North, and Lincoln called for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. In response, 4 more states, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina, joined the Confederacy. The war had begun, and it would soon engulf the entire nation. The American Civil War was marked by numerous battles, shifting strategies, and varying fortunes for both the Union and the Confederacy. The war can be broadly divided into several key phases. Early years, 1861, 1862. The early years of the war were characterized by a series of battles that revealed the determination of both sides and the scale of the conflict to come. The First Battle of Bull Run, or Manassas, in July 1861, was the first major battle of the war and resulted in a Confederate victory, shattering the Union's hope for a quick and decisive victory. Over the next year, the war expanded, with significant battles fought in Virginia, Tennessee, and along the Mississippi River. The Battle of Shiloh in April 1862, one of the bloodiest battles of the war, demonstrated the brutal nature of the conflict, with heavy casualties on both sides. Turning points. 1863. The year 1863 proved to be a turning point in the Civil War. 2 major events, the Battle of Gettysburg and the fall of Vicksburg, shifted the momentum in favor of the Union. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July to July 3, 1863 in Pennsylvania, was the largest battle of the war and resulted in a decisive Union victory. General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army was forced to retreat, ending Lee's invasion of the North. Just a day later, on July 4th, Union forces under General Ulysses S. Grant captured the city of Vicksburg, Mississippi, giving the Union control of the Mississippi River and effectively splitting the Confederacy in 2. These victories were pivotal in weakening the Confederacy and boosting Northern morale. Emancipation and total war. Another significant development in 1863 was President Lincoln's issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all enslaved people in the Confederate States were to be freed. While the proclamation did not immediately free all enslaved people, it fundamentally changed the nature of the war by making the abolition of slavery a central war aim for the Union. It also allowed for the enlistment of African American soldiers in the Union Army, many of whom fought bravely for their freedom and the Union cause. As the war progressed, the Union adopted a strategy of total war, aimed at destroying the South's ability to wage war. General William Tooma Sherman's March to the Sea in late 1864 epitomized this strategy. Sherman led his troops on a destructive campaign from Atlanta to Savannah, Georgia, destroying infrastructure, factories, railroads, and crops, and demoralizing the Southern population. The final years, 1864, 1865. By 1864, the Confederacy was increasingly on the defensive, facing shortages of men, supplies, and morale. General Grant, who had been appointed commander of all Union armies, launched a relentless campaign against Lee's forces in Virginia. Despite suffering heavy casualties, Grant continued to press forward, understanding that the Union's greater resources and manpower would eventually wear down the Confederates. The war came to a close in the spring of 1865, after a series of Union victories, including the capture of Richmond, the Confederate capital. General Lee surrendered to General Grant at Aomax Courthouse in Virginia on April 9, 1865. Lee's surrender marked the effective end of the Civil War, although some Confederate forces continued to fight for a few more weeks. And the end of the Civil War was only the beginning of a new and difficult chapter in American history: Reconstruction. The war had devastated the South, leaving its economy in ruins, its cities and infrastructure destroyed, and its social fabric shattered. The question of how to rebuild the South and integrate millions of newly freed African Americans into American society became a central challenge for the nation. The 13th Amendment. One of the most immediate and significant outcomes of the Civil War was the abolition of slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation had paved the way, but it was the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in December 1865, that formally abolished slavery throughout the United States. This amendment marked a monumental shift in American society, legally ending the institution of slavery that had existed since the country's founding. Reconstruction policies. The Reconstruction era, which lasted from 1865 to 1877, was marked by efforts to rebuild the South and to protect the rights of newly freed African Americans. Under President Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln after his assassination in April 1865, the initial approach to Reconstruction was lenient toward the former Confederate states. However, Johnson's policies were met with strong opposition from radical Republicans in Congress, who sought to impose harsher terms on the South and to ensure full civil rights for African Americans. The radical Republicans passed a series of Reconstruction Acts, which divided the South into military districts, and required the Southern states to draft new constitutions that guaranteed black men the right to vote. These acts also led to the establishment of new state governments in the South that included African American representatives, a significant step toward racial equality. The 14th and 15th Amendments. During Reconstruction, 2 additional constitutional amendments were adopted that expanded the rights of African Americans. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all persons born or naturalized in the United States, including former slaves, and guaranteed equal protection under the law. The 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, prohibited the federal government and the states from denying the right to vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Resistance, and the end of Reconstruction. Despite these advancements, Reconstruction faced significant resistance from many white Southerners who sought to restore white supremacy and limit the rights of African Americans. Organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan emerged, using violence and intimidation to suppress black political participation and to undermine Reconstruction efforts. By the mid-1870s, support for Reconstruction had waned in the North, and Southern Democrats, known as Redeemers, regained control of state governments. The Compromise of 1877, which resolved the disputed presidential election of 187-6, effectively ended Reconstruction by withdrawing federal troops from the South. This led to the establishment of Jim Crow laws, which enforced racial segregation and disenfranchised African Americans for decades to come. The American Civil War had a profound and lasting impact on the United States. It resolved the fundamental question of whether the United States would remain a unified nation or be divided into separate countries. The Union was preserved, and the principle that states could not secede from the Union was firmly established. The war also brought about the abolition of slavery, one of the most significant social changes in American history. The emancipation of millions of African Americans was a monumental step toward fulfilling the nation's founding ideals of liberty and equality. However, the promise of freedom was only partially realized, as the end of Reconstruction marked the beginning of a long struggle for civil rights that would continue into the 20th century and beyond. The Civil War also transformed the American economy and society. The war accelerated the growth of industry and the expansion of the federal government, laying the groundwork for the United States to become a major industrial power. The war also had a profound impact on American culture, influencing literature, art, and memory for generations. The legacy of the Civil War is still evident today in the United States. The conflict remains a subject of intense study, debate, and commemoration. Monuments, battlefields, and museums across the country serve as reminders of the war's significance and the issues of race, equality, and federalism that were at the heart of the Civil War continue to resonate in contemporary American society. The American Civil War was a pivotal moment in the nation's history, a time when the United States was tested as never before. The war was a brutal and bloody conflict that left deep scars on the nation, but it also brought about profound changes that continue to shape the United States today. The Civil War ended the institution of slavery, preserved the Union, and set the stage for the United States' emergence as a global power. However, it also left unresolved many of the issues that had caused the war, leading to a long and difficult struggle for civil rights and racial equality. The American Civil War is a testament to the nation's resilience and its ability to overcome deep divisions. It serves as a reminder of the costs of conflict and the importance of striving for a more just and equitable society. The lessons of the Civil War remain relevant today, as the United States continues to grapple with the legacy of its past and the ongoing challenges of building a more perfect Chapter 8. The Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, the age of reason and the foundation of modern thought. The Enlightenment, also known as the Age of Reason, was an intellectual and philosophical movement that dominated Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. It was characterized by an emphasis on reason, individualism, and skepticism of traditional authority. The ideas and values that emerged during the Enlightenment had a profound impact on politics, science, education, religion, and society, laying the groundwork for the modern world. This fact explores the origins of the Enlightenment, its key figures and ideas, the impact on various aspects of society, and the lasting legacy of this transformative period. The Enlightenment was not a sudden or isolated event, but rather the culmination of several developments in European thought, culture, and society that had been building for centuries. Scientific Revolution. The Enlightenment was deeply influenced by the scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries, during which thinkers such as Nicholas Copernicus, Galileo Galilei, Johannes Kepler, and Isaac Newton made groundbreaking discoveries in astronomy, physics, and mathematics. The success of the scientific method, which emphasized observation, experimentation, and reason, challenged traditional views of the universe and encouraged a new way of thinking about the world. The principles of the scientific revolution, empiricism, skepticism, and the search for universal law, became central to Enlightenment thought. Renaissance humanism. The Renaissance, which preceded the Enlightenment, had revived interest in the classical knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. Renaissance humanism emphasized the potential and dignity of the individual and encouraged the study of the humanities, literature, philosophy, and history. This focus on human potential and achievement laid the groundwork for the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason and the belief in human progress, the Reformation, and religious conflict. The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century challenged the authority of the Catholic Church and led to religious wars and conflicts across Europe. The questioning of religious authority and the subsequent religious diversity created an environment in which ideas about religious tolerance, freedom of conscience, and the separation of church and state began to emerge. These ideas would later be central to Enlightenment thought. Chapter 9: The Construction and Legacy of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Giza, also known as the Pyramid of Khufu or the Pyramid of Cheops, is not only the most iconic symbol of ancient Egypt, but also one of the most remarkable feats of engineering and construction in human history. Located on the Giza Plateau near Cairo, Egypt, this pyramid is the largest of the 3 pyramids at Giza, and the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world is still in existence. The construction of the Great Pyramid is estimated to have taken place over a 20-year period during the 4th dynasty of the Old Kingdom of Egypt, around Chao 2560 BC. This period in Egyptian history was characterized by great advancements in architectural techniques, a strong centralized government, and a society deeply devoted to the afterlife and the worship of their pharaohs, who were considered divine. The pyramid was built as a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu, also known by the Greek name Cheops, who reigned for approximately 23 years. It was designed to ensure that Khufu would be eternally preserved and have a grand resting place for his journey to the afterlife. The scale of the project was immense, involving the transportation and assembly of around 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, with each block weighing between 2.2 to 15 tons. One of the most astonishing aspects of the pyramid's construction is the sound precision house with which it was built. The base of the pyramid covers approximately 13 acres, 5.3 hectares, and is nearly perfectly level, with a deviation of only about 15 mm, 0.6 inches. The sides of the base align almost exactly with the mortar cardinal points of the compass, north, south, east, and west, demonstrating the Egyptians' advanced understanding of astronomy and geometry. The pyramid originally stood at 146.6 meters, 481 feet tall, although it is now slightly shorter due to the loss of the outer casing stones over time. These casing stones, made of highly polished Antura limestone, would have reflected the sun's light, making the pyramid shine like a gem when it was first completed. Today, only a few of these casing stones remain at the base of the pyramid. The interior of the pyramid is equally impressive. It houses 3 main chambers: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and the unfinished subterranean chamber. The King's Chamber, located near the center of the pyramid, contains a large granite sarcophagus that was likely intended to hold Khufu's mummified body. Above the King's Chamber are 5 stress-relieving chambers, with massive granite blocks designed to prevent the chamber from collapsing under the immense weight of the pyramid above. The construction methods used by the ancient Egyptians have been the subject of much debate among historians and archaeologists. While it is widely accepted that ramp saws were used to move the massive stones into place, the exact design and structure of these ramps are still a matter of speculation. Some theories suggest the use of a straight or zigzagging ramp along one side of the pyramid, while others propose a spiral ramp around the exterior. Contrary to popular belief, the workers who built the Great Pyramid were not slaves, but rather a well-organized workforce of skilled laborers. These workers were likely conscripted during the inundation of the Nile, when farming activities were impossible. They were housed in a nearby workers' village and provided with food, clothing, and medical care, indicating that their well-being was of considerable importance to the project. Recent archaeological discoveries at Giza have uncovered evidence of bakeries, breweries, and other facilities that supported the workforce, suggesting that these workers were respected members of society, possibly even volunteers, who saw their work as a form of their national service or their religious duty. The Great Pyramid was not just a tomb, it was also a powerful symbol of Khufu's divine status and his central role in Egyptian society. The pyramid's shape, rising to a point from a broad base, was likely intended to represent the primordial mound from which the ancient Egyptians believed the earth was created. The pyramidion, or capstone, which is thought to have been covered in gold, symbolized the sun's rays and the connection between the pharaoh and the sun god Ra. The pyramid's alignment with the stars further reinforces its symbolic significance. Some theories suggest that the layout of the Giza pyramids was designed to align with the constellation Orion, which was associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This celestial alignment would have underscored the pharaoh's journey to join the gods in the afterlife. Over the millennia, the Great Pyramid has fascinated and inspired countless generations. It has been the subject of our myth and legend, from the ancient Greeks, who believed it was built by the legendary King Cheops, to medieval and Renaissance scholars who speculated about its purpose and construction. In modern times, it continues to captivate the imaginations of both researchers and the public. The pyramid has also served as a powerful symbol of human achievement and resilience. Despite the passage of nearly more than 500 years, the Great Pyramid has withstood earthquakes, looting, and the test of time. Its sheer scale and the precision with which it was built continue to baffle scientists and engineers today. Even with modern technology, constructing a monument of such size and accuracy would be a monumental challenge. In addition to its architectural significance, the Great Pyramid has played a crucial role in the study of ancient Egyptian society. The art, inscriptions, and burial practices associated with the pyramid provide valuable insights into the beliefs, economy, and daily life of one of the most advanced civilizations of the ancient world. The Great Pyramid of Giza remains a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the ancient Egyptians. It stands as a symbol of their ability to conceive and execute projects of unimaginable scale and complexity, driven by a deep-seated belief in the afterlife and the divine nature of their rulers. As one of the most recognizable structures on Earth, it continues to draw millions of visitors each year, inspiring awe and wonder in all who behold it. Chapter 10: The Renaissance. Today, the Renaissance, a period of cultural, artistic, and intellectual revival, began in Italy in the 14th century and spread across Europe over the next 2 centuries. It marked a transition from the medieval period, often characterized as the Dark Ages, to the early modern age, and it represented a profound shift in the way people viewed the world and their place in it. The Renaissance was a time of rediscovery of the classical knowledge and values of ancient Greece and Rome, and it led to unprecedented developments in art, science, literature, philosophy, and politics. This fact explores the origins, key figures, major achievements, and lasting impact of the Renaissance, a period that reshaped the course of Western civilization. The Renaissance originated in Italy, particularly in the city-states of Florence, Venice, and Rome. Several factors contributed to the rise of the Renaissance in Italy. Economic prosperity. By the late Middle Ages, Italy had become one of the wealthiest regions in Europe. The city-states of Italy, especially Florence, Venice, and Milan, were centers of trade, commerce, and banking. The wealth generated by these activities allowed for the patronage of artists, architects, and scholars who were commissioned to create works of art, build magnificent structures, and pursue intellectual endeavors. Classical heritage. Italy was the heart of the Roman Empire, and its cities were filled with the ruins and remnants of classical antiquity. The Renaissance was characterized by a renewed interest in the art, literature, and philosophy of ancient Greece and Rome. Scholars and artists sought to rediscover and revive the knowledge and aesthetics of the classical world, which they believed had been lost or neglected during the medieval period. Political fragmentation. Unlike many other parts of Europe, which were dominated by powerful monarchies, Italy was politically fragmented into numerous city-states, each with its own government and ruler. This fragmentation fostered a competitive environment in which the ruling families of these city-states, such as the Medici of Florence, became patrons of the arts and sciences in an effort to outshine their rivals. The competition among city-states contributed to the flourishing of culture and innovation. Humanism. Humanism was a central intellectual movement of the Renaissance. It emphasized the study of classical texts and the belief in the potential and dignity of the individual. Humanists sought to apply the principles of ancient philosophy, particularly those of Plato and Aristotle, to contemporary life. They promoted the idea that humans could achieve greatness through education, reason, and the cultivation of the arts and sciences. Humanism shifted the focus of intellectual life from religious concerns to the study of humanity and the natural world. One of the most enduring legacies of the Renaissance is its art and architecture. Renaissance art represented a significant departure from the stylized and religiously focused art of the medieval period. It embraced realism, perspective, and the study of the human form, resulting in works of unparalleled beauty and technical skill. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, 1452–1519, is often regarded as the quintessential Renaissance man, embodying the ideals of the period in his pursuit of knowledge and mastery across multiple disciplines. As a painter, his most famous works include The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa, both of which exemplify his mastery of perspective, anatomy, and emotion. Leonardo was also an inventor, scientist, and engineer, leaving behind thousands of pages of sketches and notes on topics ranging from anatomy and flight to hydrodynamics and military engineering. His insatiable curiosity and interdisciplinary approach made him a symbol of the Renaissance spirit. Michelangelo Bonatti. Michelangelo, 1475–1564, was another towering figure of the Renaissance, renowned for his work as a sculptor, painter, and architect. His most famous works include the statues of David and Pieta, both of which showcase his ability to depict the human form with a level of detail and realism never before seen. Michelangelo also painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, a monumental project that remains one of the greatest achievements in the history of art. His work on the Sistine Chapel, particularly the depiction of the creation of Adam, is celebrated for its dynamic composition and powerful expression of the divine and the human. Raphael. Raphael, 1431–1520, was a master painter and architect whose works epitomize the harmony, balance, and grace that characterize Renaissance art. His frescoes in the Vatican, particularly the School of Athens, are celebrated for their use of perspective and their portrayal of classical philosophers, reflecting the Renaissance's reverence for antiquity. Raphael's ability to convey complex ideas and emotions through composition and color made him one of the most admired artists of his time. Bruna the Ferran and Renaissance architecture. Filippo Brunelli, 1371–1446, was a pioneering architect credited with developing linear perspective, a technique that revolutionized the depiction of space in art. In architecture, Bruna's most famous achievement is the dome of the Florence Cathedral, Santa Maria del Fiore, an engineering marvel that combined classical principles with innovative techniques. The dome became a symbol of the Renaissance and inspired generations of architects. Renaissance architecture, characterized by symmetry, proportion, and the use of classical elements such as columns, arches, and domes, represented a return to the ideals of ancient Rome and Greece. The Renaissance also saw a flourishing of literature and philosophy, driven by the humanist movement and the rediscovery of classical texts. Writers and philosophers of the Renaissance sought to explore the nature of humanity, the role of the individual in society, and the relationship between the earthly and the divine. Dante Alighieri. Although Dante, 1265–1321, lived before the height of the Renaissance, his work, The Divine Comedy, is often seen as a precursor to the Renaissance. Written in the vernacular Italian rather than Latin, The Divine Comedy is a complex allegory of the soul's journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven. Dante's exploration of themes such as justice, redemption, and the human condition had a profound influence on later Renaissance thinkers and writers. Petrarch. Francesco Petrarca, known as Petrarch, 1304–1374, is often called the father of humanism. He was an Italian scholar and poet who sought to revive the literature and philosophy of ancient Rome. Petrarch's discovery and promotion of classical texts, particularly the works of Cicero, laid the foundation for the humanist movement. His sonnets, written in Italian, are considered some of the greatest love poetry in Western literature, and his emphasis on individual expression and the value of personal experience became central themes of the Renaissance. Baccio. Giovanni Baccio, 113–1375, was an Italian writer, best known for his work, The Decameron, a collection of 100 tales told by a group of young people sheltering in the countryside during the Black Death. The Decameron is celebrated for its vivid portrayal of human life, its wit, and its exploration of themes such as love, fortune, and the complexity of human nature. Paco's work influenced the development of prose fiction and the short story, and his humanist outlook reflected the growing interest in the lives and experiences of ordinary people. Mavelli. Niccolò Mavelli, 1469–1527, was a Florentine diplomat and political philosopher, whose work, The Prince, is one of the most famous and controversial texts of the Renaissance. In The Prince, Machiavelli provides a pragmatic guide to political leadership, arguing that rulers must be willing to use deceit, manipulation, and ruthless tactics to maintain power and stability. Machiavelli's ideas challenged traditional moral and ethical norms of political theory and have been interpreted in various ways over the centuries. The Prince remains a foundational text in political philosophy, influencing thinkers from the Renaissance to the modern era. The Renaissance was also a period of remarkable scientific inquiry and discovery, often referred to as the Scientific Renaissance. This era saw the beginning of the scientific revolution, which would later lead to major advancements in understanding the natural world. Cernus and heliocentrism. Nicholas Cernus, 1473–1543, was a Polish astronomer who proposed the heliocentric model of the solar system, challenging the long-held belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. In his work, De Revolutionibus Aureum Caelesium, on the revolutions of the celestial spheres, Cernus argued that the Earth and other planets revolved around the Sun. This revolutionary idea laid the groundwork for modern astronomy and marked a significant shift away from geocentric models of the universe that had dominated for centuries. Galileo Galilei. Galileo, 1564–1642, was an Italian physicist, mathematician, and astronomer who built on Cernus's work and made significant contributions to the development of the scientific method. Galileo's improvements to the telescope allowed him to make groundbreaking observations, including the discovery of the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and the detailed study of the lunar surface. His support for the heliocentric model brought him into conflict with the Catholic Church, leading to his trial and house arrest. Despite this, Galileo's work laid the foundation for modern physics and astronomy, and he is often regarded as the father of modern science. Leonardo da Vinci's scientific studies. In addition to his artistic achievements, Leonardo da Vinci made significant contributions to the study of anatomy, engineering, and natural phenomena. His notebooks are filled with detailed sketches and observations on topics ranging from human anatomy to the flight of birds. Leonardo's approach to science was highly empirical, relying on careful observation and experimentation. Although many of his ideas were not fully developed during his lifetime, his work anticipated later developments in biology, physics, and engineering. Medicine and anatomy. The Renaissance also saw significant advancements in the field of medicine and the study of human anatomy. Andreas Vallius, 1514–1564, a Flemish anatomist, published De Antiporaeus Fabrica, On the Fabric of the Human Body, a groundbreaking work that provided detailed and accurate descriptions of the human body, based on dissections. Vallia's work challenged the traditional medical teachings of Galen, which had dominated for centuries, and laid the foundation for modern anatomy. The ideas and innovations of the Renaissance were not confined to Italy, but spread throughout Europe, influencing art, literature, science, and politics in countries such as France, England, Spain, and the Netherlands. The printing press. One of the most important developments that facilitated the spread of Renaissance ideas was the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century. The printing press revolutionized the production of books, making them more affordable and accessible to a wider audience. It allowed for the rapid dissemination of new ideas, including humanist literature, scientific treatises, and religious texts. The spread of printed material contributed to the intellectual and cultural flourishing of the Renaissance and played a crucial role in the Reformation and the rise of literacy. Renaissance in Northern Europe. The Renaissance spread to Northern Europe in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, where it took on its own distinct characteristics. In the Netherlands, artists like Jan van Eyck and Peter Biel the Elder developed a style of painting that combined meticulous detail with a focus on everyday life and landscapes. In England, the Renaissance found expression in the works of William Shakespeare, whose plays explored the complexities of human nature, politics, and society. The Northern Renaissance also saw the rise of Christian humanism, with figures like Erasmus of Rotterdam promoting the reform of the Church through a return to the teachings of Christ and the study of classical texts. The Renaissance in France and Spain. In France, the Renaissance was characterized by the patronage of the arts and the construction of grand chateaux, such as the Château de Chambord, which combined French Gothic architecture with Renaissance elements. The French court became a center of culture and learning, attracting artists, writers, and scholars. In Spain, the Renaissance was influenced by the Catholic monarchy and the Reconquista, with artists like El Greco blending Renaissance techniques with religious themes and the spiritual intensity of the Counter-Reformation. The Renaissance also played a role in the Protestant Reformation, a religious movement that began in the early 16th century and led to the division of Western Christianity into Catholic and Protestant branches. The humanist emphasis on individual interpretation of the scriptures and the questioning of traditional authority contributed to the rise of reformers like Martin Luther, who challenged the practices of the Catholic Church and called for a return to the teachings of the Bible. The Reformation had profound political, social, and religious implications, leading to wars of religion, the establishment of Protestant churches, and the eventual Counter-Reformation by the Catholic Church. The Renaissance's focus on human potential and the study of the classical world provided intellectual support for the Reformation and helped shape the modern religious landscape. The Renaissance left an indelible mark on Western civilization, influencing countless aspects of modern culture, thought, and society. Its emphasis on the value of human achievement, the pursuit of knowledge, and the rediscovery of classical antiquity laid the foundation for the modern world. Art and architecture. The artistic achievements of the Renaissance continue to be celebrated as some of the greatest in human history. Renaissance art and architecture set new standards for beauty, technical skill, and the representation of the human form. The techniques and principles developed during this period have influenced generations of artists and architects, from the Baroque and neoclassical periods to the modern era. science, and innovation. The Renaissance's emphasis on observation, experimentation, and the study of the natural world laid the groundwork for the scientific revolution. The work of Renaissance scientists and thinkers, such as Cernus, Galileo, and Velleius, challenged traditional views and opened the door to new ways of understanding the universe. The Renaissance spirit of inquiry and innovation continues to inspire scientific exploration and technological advancements today. Humanism and education. The humanist movement of the Renaissance had a profound impact on education and intellectual life. The study of classical texts, the development of critical thinking, and the emphasis on the dignity and potential of the individual became central to the educational ideals of the Renaissance. These principles continue to influence modern education and the liberal arts, promoting the development of well-rounded individuals capable of independent thought and creative expression. Political thought and individualism. The political ideas of the Renaissance, particularly those of Machiavelli and other humanist thinkers, contributed to the development of modern political philosophy. The Renaissance's focus on individualism, the role of the state, and the nature of power and authority laid the foundation for later political theories, including those of the Enlightenment. The Renaissance also helped shape modern concepts of citizenship, human rights, and the relationship between the individual and the state. The Renaissance was a period of extraordinary cultural, artistic, and intellectual achievement that transformed the Western world. It was a time of rediscovery and renewal, as scholars, artists, and thinkers looked to the classical past for inspiration and sought to apply its principles to their own time. The Renaissance's emphasis on humanism, individualism, and the pursuit of knowledge had a lasting impact on art, science, literature, and politics, shaping the course of Western civilization and laying the groundwork for the modern world. The legacy of the Renaissance is still felt today, in the continued appreciation of its artistic masterpieces, the ongoing pursuit of scientific inquiry, and the enduring influence of its ideas on education, philosophy, and political thought. The Renaissance remains a testament to the power of human creativity and the enduring quest for knowledge and self-expression. Political changes. The political landscape of Europe was changing in the 17th and 18th centuries, with the rise of nation-states, the decline of feudalism, and the centralization of political power. The English Civil War, 1642-1651, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, and the establishment of constitutional monarchy in England provided models of governance that emphasized the rule of law, limited government, and the protection of individual rights. These political developments influenced Enlightenment thinkers, who sought to apply reason and principles of justice to the organization of society and government. The Enlightenment was a diverse and multifaceted movement, with contributions from thinkers across Europe. These philosophers, scientists, and writers, known as philosophers, developed ideas that challenged traditional authority and sought to reform society. John Locke. John Locke, 1632-1704, was an English philosopher whose ideas about government, human nature, and knowledge had a profound impact on the Enlightenment. In his work, Two Treatises of Government, Locke argued that individuals have natural rights to life, liberty, and property, and that the purpose of government is to protect these rights. Locke's concept of the social contract, in which government derives its authority from the consent of the governed, influenced the development of democratic thought and the idea of limited government. Locke also made significant contributions to epistemology in his work. An essay concerning human understanding, where he argued that knowledge is derived from experience and that the mind is a tabula rasa, blank slate, at birth. Voltaire. François-Marie Arouet, known by his pen name Voltaire, 1694-1778, was a French writer, historian, and philosopher who was one of the most prominent figures of the Enlightenment. Voltaire was a vocal critic of the Catholic Church, organized religion, and the abuses of power by the state. He championed the principles of freedom of speech, religious tolerance, and the separation of church and state. V's wit and satirical style made his writings widely popular, and his ideas about civil liberties and human rights influenced later political thinkers and revolutionaries. Montesquieu. Charles-Louis d'Anda, Baron de Montagu, 1689–1755, was a French political philosopher whose ideas about the separation of powers became foundational to modern political theory. In his work, The Spirit of the Laws, Montagu argued that the best way to prevent tyranny and protect liberty was to divide government power among different branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. This idea of checks and balances influenced the framers of the United States Constitution and became a key principle of democratic governance. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 1712–1778, was a Swiss-French philosopher whose ideas about human nature, education, and society had a significant impact on the Enlightenment and the Romantic movement that followed. In his work, The Social Contract, Rousseau argued that individuals enter into a social contract in which they agree to form a collective community governed by the general will, or the common good. Rousseau's ideas about popular sovereignty and direct democracy influenced the French Revolution and the development of republicanism. In his work, Émile Rousseau also explored ideas about education and the development of the individual, advocating for a more natural and child-centered approach to learning. Denis D. Denis Diderot, 1784, was a French philosopher, writer, and art critic, best known as the co-founder and editor of the Encyclopédie, a massive reference work that aimed to compile and disseminate knowledge across a wide range of subjects. The Encyclopédie was a monumental project that brought together the contributions of many Enlightenment thinkers and was intended to promote reason, science, and secular thought. It played a crucial role in spreading Enlightenment ideas and making knowledge more accessible to the public. Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, 1741–1804, was a German philosopher who made significant contributions to metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and political philosophy. In his essay, What is Enlightenment?, Kant famously defined the Enlightenment as man's emergence from his self-imposed immaturity, and he emphasized the importance of individual autonomy, reason, and critical thinking. Kant's work, Critique of Pure Reason, explored the limits of human understanding and the relationship between experience and knowledge. His ethical theory, known as the categorical imperative, argued that moral actions must be guided by universal principles that respect the dignity and autonomy of all individuals. The ideas of the Enlightenment had a profound impact on various aspects of society, including politics, education, religion, and economics. These ideas challenged traditional authority and laid the groundwork for significant social and political changes. Political revolutions. The Enlightenment played a crucial role in inspiring political revolutions in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The American Revolution, 1775–1783, was heavily influenced by Enlightenment ideas, particularly those of John Locke and Montagu. The Declaration of Independence, written by Thomas Jefferson, reflected Locke's ideas about natural rights and the social contract, and the U.S. Constitution incorporated Montagu's principles of separation of powers and checks and balances. The French Revolution, 1789–1799, was also deeply influenced by Enlightenment thought. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a foundational document of the French Revolution, echoed the Enlightenment's emphasis on liberty, equality, and the rights of individuals. The revolution sought to overthrow the Anon regime, abolish feudal privileges, and establish a government based on popular sovereignty and the rule of law. The Enlightenment's impact extended beyond Europe and North America, inspiring movements for independence and reform in Latin America, the Caribbean, and other parts of the world. as colonized peoples and oppressed groups sought to apply the principles of liberty and equality to their own struggles for freedom. Education and knowledge. The Enlightenment emphasized the importance of education and the spread of knowledge as essential to human progress. Enlightenment thinkers believed that education should be accessible to all, and that it should be based on reason, science, and critical thinking rather than religious dogma. The proliferation of books, pamphlets, and periodicals during the Enlightenment helped to spread new ideas and foster a more informed and literate public. The establishment of universities, and scientific societies during the Enlightenment contributed to the advancement of knowledge and the professionalization of disciplines such as science, medicine, and law. The focus on empirical observation and experimentation led to significant advancements in fields such as physics, chemistry, biology, and astronomy. The Enlightenment's emphasis on education and knowledge laid the foundation for the modern educational system and the scientific method. Religion and secularism. The Enlightenment challenged traditional religious authority and promoted the idea of religious tolerance and freedom of conscience. Enlightenment thinkers criticized the power and influence of the Catholic Church and other religious institutions, arguing that religion should be a matter of personal belief rather than state control. The separation of church and state, a key principle of Enlightenment thought, became a foundational element of modern secular democracies. The Enlightenment also saw the rise of deism, a belief system that rejected organized religion and dogma, in favor of a more rational and naturalistic understanding of the divine. Das believed in a creator who set the universe in motion, but did not intervene in human affairs. This view was influenced by the scientific discoveries of the time and the emphasis on reason and natural law. While the Enlightenment contributed to the decline of religious authority in many parts of Europe, it also led to the development of new religious movements and ideas that sought to reconcile faith with reason. The Enlightenment's impact on religion was complex and multifaceted, contributing to the diversity of religious thought and practice in the modern world. Economics and capitalism. The Enlightenment also influenced economic thought, particularly through the work of thinkers like Adam Smith, 1790, who is often regarded as the father of modern economics. In his seminal work, The Wealth of Nations, Smith argued for the benefits of free markets, competition, and the division of labor. He introduced the concept of the invisible hand, suggesting that individuals pursuing their own self-interest in a free market would contribute to the overall wealth and prosperity of society. Smith's ideas laid the foundation for classical economics and the development of capitalism, a system that would become the dominant economic model in the Western world. The Enlightenment's emphasis on individualism, property rights, and the pursuit of happiness aligned with the principles of capitalism, leading to the growth of market economies and the expansion of global trade. While the Enlightenment brought about significant advancements in thought and society, it was not without its critiques and limitations, exclusion, and inequality. Despite its emphasis on reason, equality, and human rights, the Enlightenment often excluded women, non-Europeans, and marginalized groups from its vision of progress. Many Enlightenment thinkers held views that were racist, sexist, or Eurocentric, and their ideas were often used to justify colonialism, slavery, and the subjugation of indigenous peoples. The Enlightenment's ideals of liberty and equality were not always applied universally, leading to contradictions and tensions that would later be addressed by movements for civil rights, feminism, and decolonization. The limits of reason. Some critics of the Enlightenment argued that its emphasis on reason and rationality overlooked the importance of emotion, intuition, and tradition in human life. The Romantic movement, which emerged in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, was in part a reaction against the Enlightenment's focus on reason. Romantics emphasized the value of imagination, creativity, and the emotional and spiritual aspects of human experience. They criticized the Enlightenment's perceived reductionism and its tendency to prioritize logic over other forms of knowledge. The dark side of progress. The Enlightenment's faith in progress and human perfectibility was challenged by the events of the 20th century, particularly the world wars, totalitarian regimes, and the Holocaust. These events raised questions about the potential dangers of scientific and technological advancements when divorced from ethical considerations. The Enlightenment's legacy has been debated in light of these historical developments, leading some to question whether the pursuit of reason and progress can always lead to positive outcomes. Despite its critiques and limitations, the Enlightenment has had a lasting and profound impact on the modern world. Its ideas and values continue to shape contemporary thought, institutions, and practices. Democracy and human rights. The Enlightenment's emphasis on individual rights, the rule of law, and the separation of powers laid the foundation for modern democratic governance. The principles of liberty, equality, and justice that emerged during the Enlightenment continue to inspire movements for democracy and human rights around the world. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the United Nations in 1948, reflects the Enlightenment's commitment to the inherent dignity and rights of all individuals. Science and education. The scientific method, which was developed and refined during the Enlightenment, remains a cornerstone of modern science. The Enlightenment's emphasis on education, critical thinking, and the pursuit of knowledge has influenced the development of educational systems and institutions around the world. The values of inquiry, skepticism, and evidence-based reasoning continue to drive scientific research and innovation, secularism, and religious tolerance. The Enlightenment's promotion of religious tolerance and the separation of church and state has had a lasting impact on the development of secular societies. The principle of freedom of conscience, which was championed by Enlightenment thinkers, is now enshrined in many national constitutions and international human rights treaties. The Enlightenment's legacy of secularism has contributed to the diversity of religious beliefs and practices in the modern world. Individualism and autonomy. The Enlightenment's focus on the individual as a rational and autonomous agent has influenced contemporary notions of identity, personal freedom, and self-expression. The idea that individuals have the right to think for themselves, make their own choices, and pursue their own goals is central to modern conceptions of human rights and personal development. The Enlightenment was a transformative period in history that reshaped the way people thought about the world and their place in it. It challenged traditional authority, promoted reason and critical thinking, and laid the groundwork for many of the political, social, and scientific advancements that define the modern world. The legacy of the Enlightenment is complex and multifaceted, encompassing both the achievements and the limitations of the movement. While it brought about significant progress in areas such as democracy, science, and human rights, it also faced critiques for its exclusionary practices and its sometimes overly rationalistic approach to human experience. Nevertheless, the Enlightenment remains a foundational period in the development of Western thought and continues to influence contemporary debates about reason, freedom, and the pursuit of knowledge. Its ideas and values continue to inspire those who seek to understand and improve the world, making the Enlightenment a vital part of the ongoing human quest for truth and justice.